Hello everybody, today on the channel, the Lamborghini Huracan Technica, a car that the motoring world was so excited about, I didn't realise it even existed until a year after it had launched. And ordinarily I'd like to be cynical about these things and say, well, yes, it's clearly just yet another way to extract even more money from gullible supercar customers. I'm not all that interested in driving it. But there are two things here getting in the way. First of which is the fact that no matter how much you do or don't like them, if anybody ever offers you a go of their Lamborghini, you should always take it. And secondly, those who have driven a Huracan Technica say that it might just be one of the best Lamborghinis ever made. Can it really be true? And if it is that good enough? Find out in today's episode of JAYEMM on Cars. In this cut-and-thrust world of 21st century motor manufacturing, to stay still is a death sentence. Long gone are the days where even mainstream manufacturers could eke a decade or perhaps two out of one of their models. Now, to get 5 years out of something is an achievement. And with the ever-increasing race toward electrification, hybridization, and all of the confusion surrounding it, cars that now are just 2 or 3 years old can feel positively ancient. And yet, against this backdrop, standing loud, proud, and boasting an array of rather arresting colours has been Lamborghini. Very happy to fly the flag for the old-school supercar. And this is best personified for many, I think, in the shape of the Huracan. The successor to the wildly popular Gallardo, it, like its predecessor, is based on a platform shared with the Audi R8. And that's no bad thing, because for this second-generation car, the aluminium space frame chassis was then joined by large sections of carbon fibre, but most importantly, out back, they retained that iconic 5.2-litre V10 engine. And it is simply impossible to read any review of either an R8 or Gallardo Huracan without that engine being mentioned. Because no matter what you were ever to put it in, it was always going to be the star of the show. And even here in run-out guise, with its full-fat power of 640 horses and 417 pounds-feet of torque, that's 565 newton-meters, it may be outgunned by just about everything else supercar-shaped. It doesn't matter, because it responds brilliantly, makes a fantastic noise, and we all know 640 horsepower, sure, it might not win top trumps, but in the real world, it is far, far more than enough. But the Huracan as a car has been with us now for years, and though it was sort of facelifted halfway through that, becoming the Huracan Evo, it hasn't really changed all that much. And of course, there will be plenty of people keen to tell you that's no bad thing. Why fix it if it ain't broke? But this is the land of the supercar we are talking about, a land that exists beyond reason, beyond logic, beyond need. This is the land of want. And as human beings, we always want more. And in its twilight years, that apparently is what Lamborghini were very happy to give their customers. It started with the likes of the Performante, effectively the last version of the pre-facelift of Huracan. Then you had the Evo rear-wheel drive, which I drove, took up to Scotland and did not enjoy at all. But then latterly, Lambo went full madcap, releasing perhaps most memorably the STO, a car that they would have you believe is effectively a GT3 racer, but with number plates on. They then did something perhaps even dafter and launched the Starato, an off-road version of a supercar that I really, really want to hate, but part of me really desperately wants, and I would love to try. We then, even more recently, as if that wasn't enough, had the STJ. And perhaps it's because of all the hubbub around the likes of the STO that I completely missed the launch of the Technica midway through 2022. And if you were to read Lamborghini's brochure or press release about this car, you wouldn't come away all that much wiser. Every car manufacturer has a marketing department that honestly really does need to wind it in a little bit. But when it comes to Lamborghini, they have a knack for turning the dial up to 11. The prose written about this car is honestly nothing short of fantastical. And they like to bring out phrases that honestly I don't think anybody could ever take seriously, and maybe that's part of the charm of the company. Frustratingly though, that doesn't actually make my job any easier, because I have to try and tell you what this actually is. And a great many people have told me, well, it's very simple, James, it's just the STO, but slightly more road biased. And there is certainly some truth in that. For example, it has the same 640 horsepower variant of the venerable 5.2 litre naturally aspirated V10. Although, to call it the STO version, I think is gilding the lily just a little bit. The simple fact is, I don't believe there is any meaningful mechanical changes between all of the variants of the Huracan. The different power outputs are simply a result of software tinkering. You can give me a base spec car making 560 horsepower, and with a bit of a tweak, it too will make nearly the same amount of power. What this does have though is the rear wheel steer that you got with the Huracan STO. It also has just two-wheel drive, and ordinarily at this time of the year that might be a little bit disconcerting and would give me cause for concern when an Audi RS6 makes its presence known in my rearview mirrors. However, today it is 10.5 degrees, is sunny, has been for a little while, and I think I'm going to get the best experience I possibly could of this car at this time of year. It sits on a set of bespoke Bridgestone Potenza tyres, and the suspension apparently is bespoke to the Technica. Now, what exactly that means, I genuinely don't know. I do know that the software parameters have been tweaked. This is also another car that receives Lamborghini's LDVI system, effectively a central brain that coordinates all of the many different mechanical functions, ABS, traction control, torque vectoring, so on and so forth. The latter of which, by the way, is new for the Technica and may or may not be related to some of the fancy traction that Audi put in the R8 GT, which is their equivalent to this. And that was yet another very, very disappointing car. Visually though, I have to give the firm some credit, because where it would have been very, very easy for them to simply stick a couple of stripes on this and call it the Technica, instead, they've really gone to town. At the front end, you have a whole new bumper, which echoes the look of the Revuelto that was actually launched a year after this. Then, at the back, you've also got a complete new treatment for the rear deck. So where before it had a classic kind of hatchback affair going on, and now it's got a more old-school flat deck, a la Ferrari F355, so on and so forth, and of course, a few Lamborghinis too. The exhaust is also bespoke to the car. This one, in case you are wondering, is standard, though Don, its lovely owner, has fitted a valve controller, enabling it to stay open the whole time, as opposed to just opening at 4,000 RPM. And this is handy because it means I don't have to push the car quite so hard to give you the noise that I know you want. And I've got to say, I don't really know why anybody would put an exhaust on one of these things. It's loud, this thing. As in, how on earth did they get away with this in 2024 loud? It has just the two catalytic converters, no particulate filters, and cracks and pops like a bowl of Rice Krispies if you put it in one of its sportier modes, of which you have three: Strada for street, Sport for sport, and Corsa, which is Italian for race. Unfortunately though, across the entire decade and a bit that this car was in production, they never saw fit to give it a customizable mode, an individual setting, Ego as they call it on the larger Aventador, which does have it. And to be perfectly honest, I think all anybody actually ever wants is a bumpy road mode button. That's it. Let me have sport, but with soft suspension. Not much to ask, is it? Now, of course, this being an example of an Huracan, much about it is the same as every single other one, which is to say the boot space is frankly pathetic. You'll get one sort of EasyJet-sized case in there, maybe a touch bigger, and that's it. Inside, it is far more cramped than it should be. I'm 5'10" with my famously long torso, and even in these sporty carbon bucket seats, which are set right down low, my hair is touching the ceiling. If I put my sunglasses on, they would break. Behind, I do have a little bit of space, but that's about it. And in spite of the fact that every single reviewer out there says that, oh yeah, the suspension on this is amazing, it's really great and supple and lovely, as you can probably tell, at normal speeds, I'm doing 45 mile an hour now, it's, well, it's quite bouncy. Not crashy, but very, very bouncy. Thing is, though, that's not what this car is for, though, is it? This is a car for putting a smile on your face when you really want to have fun. So, is it any better at that? Let's find out. Well, it's very fast. Very, very fast. Are you surprised? You shouldn't be. Yes, 640 horsepower is not the number that it once was, but let's remind ourselves, a little less than that is what the McLaren F1 had. And you wouldn't kick one of those out of bed, would you? In all honesty, it is only because you're here to listen to all of this that I even feel the need to get the thing beyond about 4,000 RPM. Below that, it's got more than enough grunt, and of course, it's beautifully linear. Right, patent pending 3-point turn hill start torture test. The visibility is not quite as horrible as you think it might be. Well, didn't grind out there, that's good. This car does have lift in it. Curious spec, this one. The colour is Verde Scandal, great Lamborghini colour, but the interior has, well, nearly no carbon. In fact, none, barring these buckety seats. Instead, it's got lots and lots of Alcantara and a bit of green, which is nice enough, I suppose. And like every other Huracan, Gallardo and Aventador, you do feel like you're impossibly far back in one of these, particularly compared with a Ferrari, and especially compared with a McLaren, which, incidentally, Don did have a couple of before he got this, both a 720S and a 570. And the 570 he said was one of the most fun cars he's ever had. The 720, a technological tour de force. But unfortunately, it went really very McLaren-y on him, and so he didn't have a very good time with it. He then bought this a little while ago, and believe it or not, is using it as his daily driver, and really rather enjoying it. And he does enjoy not just the fact it's a leery, lurid lime Lamborghini, but also the little things, like the fact it has Android Auto, which up until recently I don't think many Lamborghinis actually did. Right, but enough of that. Back to the dynamics of the thing. Engine, yeah, great. No surprise there. Gearbox too, very good. The venerable 7-speed dual clutch, which has been in service for quite some time now, and you know what? It works very well indeed. In street mode, as I am now, shifts are delivered very quickly, very smoothly, and the car's not shaking about. But as you up the ante, it gets a little more visceral. Shifts get a little quicker, though even in sport, they're not too harsh, but you do then get the obligatory pops and cracks. Put the thing into Corsa, and let's see what happens. This is usually where a Lamborghini will break your neck. Okay, pop it down a gear, and up, and... oh yeah. So actually, doesn't give you the kick that even some other DCTs do, but on that upshift, felt the rear of the car brake traction. I'm putting it back into sport. Actually, no, I'm putting it back into Strada. And even in that mode, at higher speed, where you'd really want the car to start working, start gelling with the road, it doesn't. This is never a particularly smooth car. And I'm not really surprised. The tyres look virtually painted on, 30 sections, both front and rear. And it's just a frustration. I don't know why Lamborghini have such a hard time giving a car a decent ride. These seats also, I can tell, I've only been in it for about 20 minutes, and I'm starting to feel it. I don't know what it is about Lamborghini seats. I love the look of them, and these are probably the ones that I'd spec, but by the time I'm done with this review, I am going to be done with these seats. The dash then is nice, simple, clear, easy to read, all digital now. This little screen down here in the middle, which I've got to say made me laugh because apparently it's the result of all of Lamborghini's racing heritage. A touchscreen. Lads, please, can you imagine Lewis there at the weekend trying to tap on the screen of his car and scroll across and do things? No, if you wanted to evoke racing heritage, you get rid of the sodding thing and chuck it in the bin. And I have to say, part of the reason I've always been a little bit dubious about the praise heaped on the Technica is that even Lamborghini themselves are a little bit coy when it comes to quoting hard, solid numbers. So they will tell you that the car makes 35% more downforce at the rear, which I expect is easy as it's now got a fixed rear wing, but it does also have 20% less drag. That is very impressive. Also appreciate the other little touches like the cutouts on the rear that are no doubt a nightmare for anyone following, but look cool and echoed the incoming Temerario. There's even big holes just below the lights and everything, and it's very porous, this car. It seems to be a very, very trendy thing in modern car design. You know what, I'm not even taking the car down the roller coaster, my most demanding piece of test route, because you know what, I'm worried about that front scraping. It's a common problem in Lamborghinis. I had it in the Evo rear-wheel drive up in Scotland, on roads where nothing really should scrape, and I don't think my bonnet camera would like it. I have an issue with that camera. Really, really bouncy cars, it can sometimes wobble the battery loose, which is annoying. Is the suspension different to an STO? I'm sure it probably is, but I haven't driven one of those, so I can't tell you if it feels different. In any case, a Lamborghini simply don't say what they have actually changed. They haven't even said if it's softer or not. We're just left to assume that this being more road biased, it probably is. They are keen to tell you about the weight saving of the car though, with this having even optional lightweight titanium bolts and rear arch, which is a new one on me. But that claimed weight saving versus the equivalent Evo, 10 kilos. So not masses. This wet, Lamborghini do quote of course a dry weight, but it's frankly pointless, is 1,560 kilos, which is not ludicrously heavy, notably lighter say than an Aventador, but it's also no featherweight, and McLaren fans will be keen to tell you that their car is of course a lot lighter, and even a 570 I think is probably going to feel just as quick as this, and is going to be much, much better to drive over a British B road. Oh, indicators, by the way, in case you didn't know, they're the little toggle switch here, which does work, I think, a little nicer and better than the system that Ferrari use. It does take a bit of getting used to that. I'm not getting on quite so well with these standard fit carbon ceramic brakes. They're monster discs and very lovely, and they've got plenty of stopping power, but at low speeds I'm having a hard time modulating the things. Very often you might have seen me shoot forward in my seat because, well, I've cocked it up. No two ways about it. And this might have something to do with the fact that I've just gotten out of my Jag, which has a very, very soft brake pedal, but I'm usually pretty quick at adapting to these things, and I think this one is just a little unpredictable. In fairness, I have had a number of other cars from other manufacturers, including Ferrari, where they've been the same, and so maybe it just needs a few more miles. This one, in case you're wondering, is sat currently at just under 2,000. Now, I must admit, when I found out that this car was a thing, and more importantly, not a silly limited edition car that only best personal friends of the dealer can ever get, I hopped onto the Lamborghini website and I had a bit of a play around with the configurator, and I enjoyed it. Now, Lamborghini in their brochure say that one of the best things about this car is all the different colours you can have it in, both outside and in. And they'll also tell you how all of the materials in here pay tribute to Italy's legendary history of quality craftsmanship. Another fabulous nugget from the Lamborghini PR department. What I think they actually mean is there's lots of nice colours on the outside, but inside everyone's going to go for mostly Alcantara with a bit of leather and maybe some contrast stitch. Let's be honest here, that's just about the size of it, isn't it? Unique for the Technica, though, are a lot more exterior options, including some that look like stripes, which I suppose are stripes, but are made by exposing parts of the carbon fibre, including chiefly that bonnet. And you can do some really cool stuff with this, but it would appear that not many people have. And that might be because Lamborghini have at least learned one thing from Ferrari, and that's how to price their options. New, this would have been £212,000, but that's before you started speccing it. You could easily get one of these to over $250,000, and if you are brave, closer to 300, which, sure, is still going to be less than the equivalent Ferrari, the 296. But it's also nearly 200 horsepower shy, so I think it can be somewhat justified. However, it is very clear that now, just 2 years on from the car being launched, they were really desperate to shift these things. I know quite a few people whose first ever Lamborghini was a Technica that they bought new, so the dealer wasn't picky about who they sold to, and that's fine. I'm not actually angry about that. I think it's a very good thing. But it's not a good thing for residuals. These are already available for under list, with a couple of examples having a 1 at the start of their price. Granted, followed by a lot of 9s, but still. That's painful, isn't it? And I will be doing a video on this topic very soon. Problem is though, for this amount of money, you could easily have just about any Huracan Evo that you would like, including the Evo rear-wheel drive that I tested up in Scotland. And is this materially different to that? Well, let's double check. The simple answer, no. As an object, as a thing, I really quite like this. I don't want to like the fixed rear wing. I don't tend to like them on cars like this, with a few exceptions. When I was younger, I loved it, but it does work. The overall styling, in fact, I think really does work. There is, I think, always something to be said for the purity of the original Lamborghini designs, be it Countach, Diablo, Murcielago, or Aventador, and both Gallardo and Huracan are no exception. But apparently, the first-gen Huracan, it's just not a great car to drive. I've never actually tried one. I'd love to. If someone out there's got one, please drop me a line. And this, by all accounts, is a much improved car. But compared with that Evo rear-wheel drive, I don't really feel like it's markedly better in any particular way. Is this the best Huracan of them all? I haven't driven enough to give you an honest answer on that one. Is it fun to drive? Oh, yeah, it's quick, makes a great noise, does make you feel very special being in this thing. The steering is direct, got a nice weighting to it, but not particularly feelsome. The brakes, they're a bit grabby, and that suspension, it's just constantly too firm. And it doesn't even have the excuse of being unsophisticated. It's not like the Assetto Fiorano Pack 296 that I drove, which has fixed dampers. These are not just variable, but they're magnetic as well. There's no reason this car can't ride nicely. The turning circle's pretty good though. That I suppose we can thank the rear wheel steer for. And it does feel like a decent, relatively stable car in the corners. Provoke it on exit though, and it does want to try and light up those rears. Grip today feels very good, but I will admit I am exercising a little bit of caution just because I'm not getting that feedback that I'd really want and I would be getting from, say, a 488, and certainly a McLaren of any description. And I suppose maybe to criticise this car for its ride being a bit unsophisticated, the ergonomics being a touch compromised, could be to miss the point entirely. It's a Lamborghini Huracan. It's a car that we all know is over a decade old now, and it revels in that fact. But my problem as a road tester is, yeah, sure, I get that. But you could say that of just about every other Huracan out there, and a large number of R8s as well. Can I really think of a reason why you would want to have the Technica? Oh yeah, I guess if you want the latest, the greatest, but you don't want to put up with an STO or pay for one, makes a lot of sense. But just do me a favour, will you? Do not buy one thinking it's going to hold its money. Today on Auto Trader, there are 28 of these for sale. 28. That's a lot. For a Lamborghini that had a production run of some 2 years, yeah, they chuck these things out at a fair rate of knots. But it is still a proper Lamborghini, and I'll always admire that. I will always stop and look at it in the car park, and maybe it's all it ever needed. So, I want to say a big thank you to Don for bringing his car out, and as ever, to you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.